Hey there, hope you guys are doing well. In today's video, we're going to learn what is VPC, IGW, VPN, and how this AWS Direct Connect helps you to reduce network costs and increase the amount of bandwidth that can travel through your network. And I'm Injara Ramlingappa, DevOps engineer. Let's get into it. Today's agenda we have very first one Amazon Virtual Private Cloud. Second, Internet Gateway, Virtual Private Gateway, Subnets, and finally we have AWS Direct Connect. In coming videos, I'll be explaining what is Network ACL, Security Group, as well as Web Application Firewall. But in today's video, we'll be concentrating only on AWS Direct Connect. So, firstly, what is virtual private cloud? So, virtual private cloud is a service. It's a networking service that you can use to establish boundaries around your AWS resources. Okay, so any kind of resources, maybe any cloud resources. In my case here, it is a AWS resources. So I'm keeping the resources. Resources may be EC2 instances or my databases. Okay, so I'm keeping the resources inside a protective boundary. So I'm keeping those resources inside a protective boundary. So that protective boundary is called VPC. Okay, so I'm creating that protective boundary around my resources. Okay, that is what VPC is. Okay, so it applies to any general VPC. VPC means it's a networking service that you can use to establish a boundaries around your resources. Okay, that is what VPC is. Here in this figure you can see, so this is the cloud, AWS cloud. So I'm keeping the resources, my resources here. I have EC2 here, I have my database server. Okay, so I'm keeping my resources inside this protective layer. Okay, so this protective layer, this green color protective layer is called VPC, virtual private cloud. Okay, so here you can organize your resources into subnets. So uh, what is subnets? So what are subnets? So in general terms, if I explain subnets, subnets are chunk of IP address to use, you use to organize or group your resources. Okay, it's here it says a subnet is a section of a VPC that can contain resources such as Amazon EC2 instances or database or anything. Okay, so we are grouping our resources with the help of subnet. That is what subnet is. Okay, we'll see what is subnets in the coming slide, but at this moment subnet means it's just a chunks of IP address used to organize your resources or used to group your resources. Okay, so that is what virtual private cloud. So we have a resource here inside my VPC. If I want to access this resources, for example, in this EC2 instance, I have my web server, for example, Tomcat or Apache. If I want to access that, how can I get through into this? How can I get into this? Uh, VPC, this protective layer. How can I get into this? We need a doorway, right? So that is what this internet gateway is. It's like a doorway. It creates a path. It allows you to it enter into the VPC and access the resources. Okay, so to allow public traffic from the internet to access your VPC, you attach an internet gateway to the VPC. Okay, an internet gateway is a connection between a VPC and the internet. Okay, so this is the see, I'm accessing, I'm giving a request to access the resources inside this VPC. So through this internet gateway, I'll be able to access this VPC. So it's like a, you can think of an internet gateway as being similar to a doorway. It's like a door. So without this internet gateway, no one can access the resources within your VPC. So if I want to access the resources, whatever inside the VPC, I have to go through the internet gateway. Okay. Without internet gateway, no one can access the resources within my VPC. That is what internet gateway. So sometimes what happens, I don't want someone. So here you can observe, there is no restriction. Anyone can access the resources whatever I have in inside the VPC. Okay, here it says it's a public traffic. Okay, but I don't want someone from other network. I don't want everyone to access the resources inside my VPC. So at that time, what I'll do, I'll attach a private virtual private gateway. Okay, so I only allow people or users from approved network. Okay, so I only allow people from approved network to access my resources inside the VPC. At that time, what I'll do, I'll attach a virtual private gateway, so that only allows the private traffic. Okay, so here in this figure you can see in here just random computer, but here it's a corporate data center. Okay, so I'm creating a, that protected encrypted layer from my data center to my VPC. So I'm only allowing the private traffic, not public traffic. Okay, I'm only allowing the private traffic to enter into my VPC and access the resources I have within the VPC. Okay, so virtual private gateway is to access private resources in a VPC. You can use a virtual private gateway. Okay, the virtual private gateway is the component that allows protected internet traffic to enter into the VPC. A virtual private gateway enables you to establish a virtual private network connection between a VPC and a private network, such as an on premises data center or internal corporate network. A virtual private gateway allows traffic into the VPC only if it is coming from an approved network. Okay, so it is like I'm going from my office to home with a bodyguard. Okay, so that bodyguard is what? That bodyguard is VPC. I'm creating some extra protective layer. That extra protective layer is what? VPN. Okay, I'm sending the traffic, I'm sending the request with the extra protective layer. This extra protective layer, this is what VPN is. Okay, so uh, what is virtual private gateway? In simple words, here I'm going to allow only private traffic, only users from approved network. Okay, here I'm not allowing any users from private public network. I'm only allowing users from the approved network. Okay, that is what virtual private gateway. So though we create a VPN, so it helps to establish a VPN, that encrypted private, you know, uh, layer, but we still use a regular internet connection that has a bandwidth that is being shared by many people using the internet, right? So it's like I'm going from my office to home with a bodyguard, but I'm using the same path where everyone are using the same road. Okay, so I'm getting the interruptions, everyone are walking. Okay, so there is no dedicated path from my office to home, though I have a bodyguard. So that is what virtual private gateway. So there is no dedicated path. If I want to create a dedicated path, if I want to create a dedicated protective path from my data center to my VPC, then I should go with the AWS Direct Connect. So AWS Direct Connect is a service that enables you to establish a dedicated private connection between your data center and a VPC. Here you can see it is a dedicated, path, dedicated way, so it's a dedicated private connection between your data center and VPC. The private connection that AWS Direct Connect provides helps you to reduce network cost. Okay, and increase the amount of bandwidth that can travel to your network. This is how AWS Direct Connect helps you to reduce the network cost. So and the amount of bandwidth that can travel through your network. Okay, So in the next slide, we have subnets. As I told, subnet is just a what do you call chunks of IP address helps you to reorganize or organize your resources or group your resources. So subnet is a section of a VPC in which you can group resources based on security or operational needs. Subnets can be public or private. Here you can see this is the public subnet. Anyone can, uh, people can access it, but private subnet we cannot access. Only if we have a permission we can access the private subnet. Uh, the resources within the private subnet. So public subnets can contain resources that need to be accessible by the public, such as our website, so websites or anything like that. So private subnets contain resources that should be accessible only through a private network. So such as database that contains customer personal information and order histories or something like that. If you're talking about organization, so if I want to access the database, I should be from the approved network. Okay. So that is what the private network is. In a VPC, subnets can communicate with each other. For example, you might have an application that involves Amazon EC2. And if you want to communicate with the database uh, in a private subnet, we can communicate from public subnet to a private subnet. Okay. That is it for today. Uh, we'll see you in the next video.